Marissa had always known her in-laws didn't approve of her. From the very first day she met them, their disapproving glances and cold remarks made it clear they thought she wasn't good enough for their son, Ethan. But Marissa didn't care what they thought. Ethan was her world, her rock, and together they had built a beautiful life. They shared laughter, dreams, and even challenges, always standing by each other no matter what. And when little Leo came into their lives, their family felt complete. But life has a way of testing people in ways they never expect. One fateful night, everything changed. Ethan was driving home from work when his car skidded on a wet road. The accident left Marissa not only heartbroken, but also facing the daunting task of raising their 6-year-old son alone. Without Ethan, the weight of the world seemed to press down on her shoulders. She had to be both mom and dad now, juggling bills, school runs, and bedtime stories while trying to keep her head above water. Her in-laws, who already disliked her, saw this as an opportunity. To them, Marissa was weak, a single mother struggling to make ends meet. They began visiting more often, not out of concern for Leo or Marissa, but with ulterior motives. During one particularly tense visit, they sat across from her at the dining table and dropped a bombshell. "You're not capable of raising Leo alone," they said bluntly. "We want full custody." Marissa couldn't believe what she was hearing. Custody? Of her own child? Her voice trembled as she replied, "Leo is my son. I'm his mother. I've raised him since the day he was born. He needs me." But her in-laws weren't listening. Their minds were made up. They argued that Marissa's financial struggles and emotional state after losing Ethan proved she wasn't fit to take care of him. Every word felt like a dagger piercing her heart. The tension between them grew thicker with every passing week. Marissa tried to stay calm for Leo's sake, but inside, she was fighting a battle she never imagined she'd have to face. Then, one weekend, her in-laws suggested taking Leo on a short trip, a family outing, they called it. At first, Marissa hesitated. Something about the idea didn't sit right with her. But eventually she agreed, thinking it might do Leo some good to spend time outdoors and maybe even mend fences with his grandparents. On the morning of the trip, Marissa packed a small bag for Leo, filled with snacks, toys, and extra clothes. As they drove off, she waved goodbye, forcing a smile despite the uneasy feeling gnawing at her gut. Hours passed, and just as she started wondering why they hadn't returned yet, her phone buzzed. It was a text message from her father-in-law. "We've decided it's best if you don't see Leo again. You'll understand someday." Panic surged through her veins. She called them immediately, but the number went straight to voicemail. Desperate, she grabbed her purse and rushed outside, hoping to flag down someone who could help. That's when reality hit her like a punch to the chest. They had abandoned her. On the side of a deserted road, miles away from civilization, with nothing but the clothes on her back and a faint memory of where they might have left her. Fear gripped her tightly as she looked around. The landscape stretched endlessly before her, a vast expanse of sand and shrubs under a blazing sun. There was no sign of another human being anywhere. She sank to her knees, tears streaming down her face, clutching the phone that offered no answers. What kind of people would do this? How could they leave her here, stranded and helpless? But then, a tiny voice pulled her back to the present. "Mommy?" It was Leo, tugging gently at her sleeve. His big brown eyes were wide with confusion and worry. Seeing him reminded her of why she couldn't give up. No matter how scared or angry she felt, she had to protect him. Forcing herself to stand, she wiped her tears and knelt down to his level. "Don't worry, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "We're going to be okay. Mommy will take care of us." With those words, she picked up the backpack they had brought along, a simple bag meant for a day trip, and began rummaging through its contents. Thankfully, there were 2 bottles of water, a few granola bars, and a thin blanket. Not much, but enough to get them through the next few hours. As the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert floor, Marissa wrapped the blanket around Leo and held him close. The temperature dropped quickly once, The sun disappeared and the cold seeped into their bones. Marissa kept talking to Leo, telling him stories of brave heroes who overcame impossible odds. She described imaginary adventures, painting vivid pictures of courage and hope. Anything to distract him, and herself, from the harsh reality of their situation. By the time the first stars appeared in the sky, exhaustion weighed heavily on both of them. Sleep came in fits and starts, interrupted by the biting chill and the eerie silence of the desert. But even in the darkest moments, Marissa refused to let despair take over. Deep down, she believed someone would find them. Someone had to. Little did she know, salvation was closer than she thought. In the distance, headlights pierced the darkness, moving steadily toward them. Summoning every ounce of strength she had left, Marissa stood up, holding Leo's hand tightly. As the vehicle drew nearer, she waved frantically, praying it wasn't just a mirage born of desperation. When the car finally stopped, relief washed over her like a tidal wave. A man stepped out, his silhouette illuminated by the glow of the headlights. For the first time in days, Marissa allowed herself to breathe. Help had arrived, and with it came a glimmer of hope. The first rays of sunlight painted the desert in shades of gold and orange, but Marissa barely noticed. Her mind was focused on survival, on keeping herself and Leo alive until help arrived. The night had been brutal. The cold air bit at their skin, and the thin blanket did little to shield them from the freezing temperatures. She had held Leo close, using her body to keep him warm while whispering soft reassurances into his ear. "We're going to be okay," she repeated over and over, though deep down doubt gnawed at her. By morning, dehydration became a real threat. Their 2 bottles of water were already half empty, and Marissa knew they couldn't afford to waste even a single drop. She handed Leo a small sip, watching carefully as he tilted the bottle back. "Just a little bit, sweetheart," she said gently. "We need to make it last." He nodded, trusting her completely, and that trust gave her strength. She couldn't let him down. With no clear idea of where they were or how far civilization might be, Marissa decided they needed to move. Sitting still wouldn't get them anywhere. She slung the backpack over her shoulder, took Leo's hand, and started walking. Each step felt heavier than the last, but she pushed forward, scanning the horizon for any sign of life, a car, a building, anything. The desert stretched endlessly around them, barren and unforgiving, but Marissa refused to give up. To distract Leo and herself, she began telling stories. Stories about brave explorers who crossed deserts, climbed mountains, and sailed oceans. She described imaginary worlds filled with talking animals and magical forests, painting vivid pictures with her words. Leo listened intently, his eyes wide, with wonder. Occasionally he chimed in with questions or added his own twists to the tales. His laughter, though faint, was enough to remind her why she kept fighting. For him. Always for him. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the heat grew unbearable. Sweat trickled down Marissa's face and her throat felt like sandpaper. Still, she rationed the water carefully, giving Leo tiny sips whenever he asked. By midday, their energy was fading fast. They stopped under the shade of a sparse bush, sitting side by side as Marissa tried to think of what to do next. Leo leaned against her, his head resting on her lap. "Are we lost, Mommy?" he asked quietly, his voice tinged with worry. Marissa hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "We're just finding our way," she replied, forcing a smile. "And we'll find it soon, I promise." Her promise sounded hollow even to her own ears, but she clung to it anyway. Hope was all they had left. Hours passed, and the landscape remained unchanged. Just when despair began creeping in, Marissa spotted something in the distance. A black SUV kicking up dust along the barren road. Her heart leapt. Was it real? Or was it another mirage born of exhaustion and thirst? Clutching Leo's hand tightly, she stood up and squinted, willing the vehicle to come closer. It did. Summoning every ounce of strength she had left, Marissa stepped onto the road and waved frantically, her arms flailing like flags in the wind. The SUV slowed down, its tires crunching against the gravel. A man stepped out, shielding his eyes from the sun as he approached them cautiously. Relief flooded through Marissa as she realized this wasn't a dream. It was real. Help had finally arrived. "Are you okay?" the man asked, his voice calm but concerned. Marissa nodded, tears streaming down her face. "We've been stranded," she managed to say between sobs. "Please, can you help us?" Without hesitation, the man ushered them into the SUV, cranking up the air conditioning to cool their overheated bodies. He handed them bottled water and snacks, which Marissa accepted gratefully. As they drank and ate, she told him their story, the betrayal, the abandonment, the endless hours spent wandering in the desert. The man listened silently, his expression shifting from shock to anger as she spoke. "My name is Jonathan," he said finally, offering a reassuring smile. "Let me take you somewhere safe." For the first time in days, Marissa allowed herself to relax. Leo curled up in the back seat, fast asleep, while she stared out the window, watching the desert blur past. Jonathan drove steadily, occasionally, glancing at her through the rearview mirror. There was something comforting about his presence, something steady and dependable. She didn't know much about him yet, but she sensed he could be trusted. They reached a small town just as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and purple. Jonathan pulled into a motel parking lot and helped Marissa check in. He insisted on paying for the room despite her protests. "You've been through enough," he said firmly. "Let me handle this." That night, as Leo slept peacefully beside her, Marissa sat by the window, staring at the stars. Exhaustion weighed heavily on her, but sleep eluded her. Her mind raced with thoughts of what lay ahead. What would she do now? How could she protect Leo from people who seemed determined to tear their family apart? And who was Jonathan, really? Why had he gone out of his way to help them? Despite her questions, one thing was certain. She owed him her gratitude, and more importantly, her trust. Something about him felt genuine, like he truly cared about their well-being. For the first time since Ethan's death, Marissa felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, things were beginning to turn around. Over the next few days, Jonathan stayed in touch, checking in regularly to see how they were doing. He offered to drive them back to the city, but Marissa declined, fearing her in-laws might try to interfere again. Instead, she focused on regaining her footing, taking things one day at a time. With Jonathan's support, she began to believe that perhaps their nightmare was coming to an end, and that brighter days awaited them. But Marissa couldn't shake the feeling that their journey was far from over. Little did she know Jonathan's involvement in their lives was only beginning, and it would change everything in ways she never imagined. Over the next few days, Marissa and Leo settled into a routine at the small motel. It wasn't luxurious by any means, but it was safe, and for now, that was enough. Jonathan had offered to book them a nicer place, but Marissa insisted this would do. She didn't want to take advantage of his kindness, even though he kept reassuring her it wasn't an inconvenience. Still, she couldn't help but feel a mix of gratitude and unease every time he called or stopped by to check on them. Jonathan's presence became a constant in their lives, almost like a lifeline. He brought groceries, helped with laundry, and even arranged for a doctor to visit when Leo developed a slight fever from dehydration. Marissa watched him carefully, trying to understand why someone like him, a man who clearly lived a life far removed from hers, would go out of his way to help strangers. At first, she assumed it was pity, but as the days passed, she realized there was more to it than that. There was sincerity in his actions, a quiet determination to make sure they were okay. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jonathan showed up with pizza and soda. "I thought you guys might need a break from sandwiches," he said with a warm smile, setting the boxes down on the small table. Leo's eyes lit up at the sight of the food, and he immediately started chattering about his favorite toppings. Watching him laugh and talk animatedly, Marissa felt a pang of guilt. Guilt because she knew none of this would have been possible without Jonathan's generosity. After dinner, Jonathan stayed longer than usual. He sat cross-legged on the floor with Leo, teaching him how to fold paper airplanes. The two of them laughed as the makeshift planes soared across the room, sometimes crashing hilariously into walls or furniture. Marissa watched from the sidelines, sipping her soda and feeling something she hadn't felt in a long time: peace. For those fleeting moments, the weight of everything, the betrayal, the desert, the uncertainty, seemed to lift. When Leo finally drifted off to sleep, curled up on the bed with one of the paper airplanes clutched in his hand, Marissa turned to Jonathan. "Why are you doing all this?" she asked quietly, her voice tinged with both curiosity and hesitation. "You don't owe us anything." Jonathan leaned back against the wall, his expression thoughtful. "Let's just say I've been where you are," he said after a pause. "Not exactly the same situation, but close enough. I know what it's like to feel like the world is against you, like no one believes in you. And I also know how much difference it can make when someone steps in and says, 'I believe in you.'" Marissa stared at him, surprised by his candor. Until now, she hadn't given much thought to who Jonathan was beyond the kind stranger who had saved them. But his words hinted at a deeper story, one she wanted to hear but didn't dare ask about yet. Instead, she nodded slowly, absorbing what he had said. "Besides," Jonathan added with a grin, breaking the seriousness of the moment, "Leo's pretty great company. Who wouldn't want to hang out with a kid who makes killer paper airplanes?" That made Marissa laugh, and for the first time in weeks it felt genuine. Not forced or strained, but real. She realized then that Jonathan wasn't just helping them survive. He was giving them something else: hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. The next morning, Jonathan invited Marissa to join him for breakfast at a nearby cafe. She hesitated at first, unsure if it was appropriate to accept such an offer, but eventually agreed. After all, she reasoned, she owed him so much already. Plus, it would be nice to step out of the motel room for a change. At the cafe, they sat by the window, sipping coffee and talking about everything under the sun. Jonathan asked about her life before the desert incident, her dreams, her struggles, her hopes for the future. Marissa found herself opening up in ways she hadn't expected. She told him about Ethan, about how much she missed him, and about how hard it had been to raise Leo alone. She talked about her passion for helping others, especially families going through tough times, and how she'd always dreamed of starting a community center someday. Jonathan listened intently, nodding occasionally and asking thoughtful questions. When she finished speaking, he leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "What if I told you I could help make that dream come true?" he said. Marissa blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean exactly what I said," Jonathan replied, his tone serious but kind. "You've got the vision, the drive, and the heart to pull it off. All you need is the resources, and I happen to have those. Let me fund your community center. Let's build something amazing together." For a moment, Marissa was too stunned to respond. The idea of having her dream funded by someone else felt overwhelming, almost surreal. I don't know what to say," she stammered finally. "It's incredibly generous, but are you sure? This isn't charity, is it?" "It's not charity," Jonathan assured her. "Think of it as a partnership. You bring the passion and purpose, and I'll provide the tools. Together we can create something that helps people in ways neither of us could do alone." Marissa's mind raced as she considered his offer. On one hand, it sounded too good to be true, a chance to turn her lifelong dream into reality. On the other hand, accepting such a huge favor felt daunting. What if she failed? What if she let him down? As if sensing her doubts, Jonathan reached across the table and placed a reassuring hand on hers. "You won't fail," he said firmly. "I've seen how strong you are, how determined you are to protect your son and give him a better life. If anyone can make this work, it's you." His words struck a chord deep within her. For so long, she had doubted herself, convinced that she wasn't capable of achieving her dreams. But sitting there looking into Jonathan's earnest eyes, she began to believe again. Maybe she could do this. Maybe she was strong enough. By the time they left the cafe, Marissa's head was spinning with possibilities. Jonathan promised to draw plans and connect her with architects and designers who could bring the community center to life. In return, he asked only one thing, that she stay true to her vision and never lose sight of why she wanted to do this in the first place. That night, as Marissa tucked Leo into bed, she couldn't stop smiling. For the first time in what felt like forever, the future didn't seem so bleak. Yes, challenges lay ahead, but she had hope, and for now that was enough. Little did she know, however, that their journey was far from over. While Jonathan's support offered a lifeline, it also brought complications, ones that would test her resolve and force her to confront old enemies once again. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. With Jonathan's support, Marissa threw herself into planning the community center. She spent hours sketching layouts, researching programs, and meeting with architects who shared her vision. It was exhausting but exhilarating, the kind of work that made her feel alive again. For the first time since Ethan's passing, she had something to look forward to, something bigger than herself. Leo, too, seemed to thrive under the new routine. Jonathan visited often, bringing toys, books, and sometimes even science kits for Leo to tinker with. The two of them quickly formed a bond, spending afternoons building model rockets or playing chess. Marissa watched from the sidelines, marveling at how naturally Jonathan fit into their lives. He wasn't just a benefactor, he was becoming part of their family. But not everyone was happy about the changes. Word of Marissa's newfound partnership with Jonathan eventually reached her in-laws. At first they dismissed it as gossip. After all, what could a wealthy stranger possibly see in someone like Marissa? But when rumors turned into undeniable facts, their anger boiled over. They saw Jonathan's involvement as a direct threat to their plans. If Marissa succeeded in creating a stable life for herself and Leo, they would lose any chance of gaining custody. One afternoon, while Marissa was reviewing blueprints for the community center, her phone buzzed incessantly. She glanced at the screen and froze. It was her father-in-law calling. Her stomach churned as she debated whether to answer. Finally, she pressed the green button, bracing herself for whatever venom they planned to spew. "You think you're clever, don't you?" His voice growled through the speaker. "Using some rich man to fund your little project. Do you really believe that makes you a better parent?" Marissa clenched her fists, forcing herself to stay calm. "I'm not using anyone," she replied firmly. "This is about giving back to people who need help, something you wouldn't understand." "Oh, we understand perfectly," he shot back. "You're trying to buy your way out of responsibility, relying on handouts instead of proving you can take care of our grandson properly. Well, let me tell you something. If you think this changes anything, you're wrong. We'll fight for Leo until the end." Before Marissa could respond, he hung up, leaving her trembling with frustration. She hated how easily they could rattle her, how their words still carried the power to make her doubt herself. But she refused to let them win, not this time, not when she finally had something worth fighting for. When Jonathan arrived later that evening, Marissa told him everything. She expected him to offer sympathy or advice, but instead, he listened quietly, his jaw tightening with each word. When she finished, he stood up abruptly and grabbed his car keys. "Where are you going?" Marissa asked, confused. "To have a little chat with your in-laws," he said, his tone clipped. "They need to hear a few things straight from me." "No, wait," Marissa protested, grabbing his arm. "You can't just barge in there and confront them. It'll only make things worse." Jonathan hesitated, then sighed. "Fine," he said reluctantly. "But I'm not letting them intimidate you anymore. We'll handle this together, but my way." Over the next few days, Jonathan put his resources to work. He hired a private investigator to dig into her in-laws' past behavior, uncovering evidence of their manipulative tactics and attempts to isolate Marissa after Ethan's death. Armed with this information, he arranged a formal meeting with her in-laws, insisting Marissa attend as well. The day of the confrontation arrived, and Marissa felt sick to her stomach. She sat beside Jonathan in a quiet conference room at a local cafe, her hands shaking as she clutched a glass of water. Across the table, her in-laws glared at them, their faces red with indignation. "What is the meaning of this?" her mother-in-law demanded, pointing an accusatory finger at Jonathan. Who do you think you are meddling in our family affairs? I'm someone who cares about Marissa and Leo, Jonathan replied evenly, and someone who won't stand by while you try to destroy their lives. Her father-in-law scoffed. Don't act like you know anything about us or them. You're just another outsider looking for attention. Actually, Jonathan said, pulling out a folder filled with documents, I know quite a bit, including the fact that you abandoned Marissa and Leo in the desert, and that you've been harassing her ever since, trying to take Leo away because you think she's not good enough. Marissa's in-laws paled as Jonathan laid out the evidence piece by piece, photos, witness statements, even recordings of their threats. Their bravado crumbled under the weight of the truth. This isn't over, her father-in-law muttered weakly, but his voice lacked conviction. It is for now, Jonathan said firmly. If you come near Marissa or Leo again, I'll make sure the authorities are involved. Is that clear? Defeated, they nodded silently and left the room without another word. Marissa exhaled deeply, tears streaming down her face. She turned to Jonathan, overwhelmed with gratitude. Thank you, she whispered. I don't know what I'd do without you. You'll never have to find out, he replied, squeezing her hand reassuringly. With her in-laws out of the picture, at least temporarily, Marissa focused all her energy on the community center. Construction began within months, transforming an empty lot into a vibrant hub of activity. Volunteers poured in, eager to help paint walls, install playground equipment, and organize workshops. Every step of the process brought Marissa closer to her dream, and every milestone felt like a victory. Meanwhile, her relationship with Jonathan continued to deepen. What started as gratitude evolved into something more, a mutual respect and admiration that neither of them could ignore. They spent long evenings discussing ideas for the center, sharing meals and laughing over silly jokes Leo told. Slowly but surely, Marissa realized she was falling for him. One evening, as they walked along the beach near Jonathan's home, Marissa finally mustered the courage to say what had been on her mind for weeks. I owe you so much, she began, staring at the waves lapping at the shore. More than I can ever repay, but I want you to know I don't just see you as someone who helped me. You're important to me, to both of us. Jonathan stopped walking and turned to face her, his eyes soft with emotion. You don't owe me anything, he said gently. Helping you wasn't about repayment. It was about seeing someone incredible rise above everything life threw at them. And honestly, I think I've fallen for you too. Tears welled up in Marissa's eyes as she smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. For so long she had believed love was something she'd lost forever. But standing there, with Jonathan, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and pink, she realized that love could find its way back, even in the most unexpected places. As the months passed, the community center opened its doors, welcoming families from all walks of life. Marissa stood proudly beside Jonathan during the ribbon-cutting ceremony, watching as children ran through the playground and parents chatted excitedly about upcoming events. It was everything she had dreamed of and more. For Marissa, the journey had been long and difficult, but it had led her to where she belonged, surrounded by love, purpose, and hope. And though challenges lay ahead, she knew she could face them as long as she had her son, her dreams, and the man who had changed her life forever by stopping to look closer. The opening of the community center was more than just a milestone for Marissa. It was a turning point. The day began with a flurry of activity as volunteers bustled around, setting up tables, arranging chairs, and hanging colorful banners that read, "Welcome to a new beginning." Children giggled as they explored the playground, their laughter echoing through the air like music. Parents chatted nervously but excitedly, exchanging stories about how they'd heard of the center and what they hoped it would bring to their families. Marissa stood near the entrance, her heart pounding with a mix of pride and anxiety. She had poured her soul into this project, working tirelessly alongside Jonathan to make it happen. Now, seeing the space filled with people, real people whose lives might change because of her efforts, was overwhelming. Every smile, every handshake, every word of thanks felt like validation for all the struggles she'd endured. Jonathan stayed close by her side, offering quiet encouragement whenever she needed it. He could tell she was nervous, even though she tried to hide it behind her confident demeanor. "You've got this," he whispered as they greeted a group of visitors. "Look at them. They're already falling in love with this place." Marissa glanced around and smiled, feeling a surge of gratitude not just for Jonathan's support, but for everyone who had helped make the center a reality. From the architects who designed the building to the volunteers who painted walls late into the night, it truly was a team effort. And yet, deep down, she knew none of it would have happened without Jonathan's belief in her. His faith in her abilities had given her the courage to dream bigger than she ever thought possible. As the day wore on, Marissa found herself drawn into countless conversations with attendees. A young mother shared how hard it had been to raise her kids alone after leaving an abusive relationship. An elderly man talked about feeling isolated since his wife passed away, until he discovered volunteer opportunities at the center. Each story reminded Marissa why she had started this journey in the first place, to create a safe haven where people could find connection, support, and hope. But amidst the joy and celebration, there was still a shadow looming over her mind: her in-laws. Though Jonathan's intervention had temporarily silenced them, she couldn't shake the fear that they might try something again. They hadn't contacted her since the confrontation, but their absence felt less like peace and more like a storm brewing on the horizon. Marissa tried to push those thoughts aside, focusing instead on the positive energy surrounding her. Still, the uncertainty lingered. Later that evening, after most of the guests had left, Marissa and Jonathan sat together on a bench outside the center, watching the stars twinkle above. Leo slept soundly inside, exhausted from a full day of running around and making new friends. For a while, neither of them spoke, content to simply enjoy the quiet moment together. Finally, Jonathan broke the silence. "You did amazing today," he said softly. "I'm so proud of you." Marissa sighed, leaning back against the bench. "It feels surreal, doesn't it? Like I'm living someone else's life. Just a few months ago, I was stranded in the desert, convinced I'd never get back on my feet. And now, look at this." "It's proof of how strong you are," Jonathan replied. "You didn't let anything break you. Not your in-laws, not the desert, not even your own doubts. You kept going no matter what." His words warmed her heart, but they also stirred something deeper, a realization that she wasn't fighting this battle alone anymore. Between Jonathan's unwavering support and the growing sense of purpose she felt through the center, Marissa finally understood what it meant to have a true partner. Someone who believed in her when she struggled to believe in herself. Their conversation eventually turned to lighter topics: plans for future events at the center, ideas for expanding its reach, and even silly jokes about Leo's obsession with paper airplanes. But as the night grew cooler, Marissa hesitated before broaching a subject that had been weighing on her mind. "What happens if they come back?" she asked quietly, her voice barely audible. Jonathan didn't need clarification. He knew exactly who they were. "They won't win," he said firmly. "Not anymore. We've got everything we need to protect you and Leo. Legal documents, evidence, resources. If they try anything, we'll handle it together. You don't have to face them alone this time." Though his words reassured her, Marissa couldn't help but wonder if her in-laws would ever truly give up. She knew their pride wouldn't let them admit defeat easily, but she also knew she couldn't live in fear forever. With Jonathan by her side, she felt stronger, braver. Maybe it was time to stop letting them control her life, even if only in her mind. Over the next few weeks, the community center became a second home for Marissa and Leo. It buzzed with activity every day, hosting workshops, counseling sessions, art classes, and family game nights. People came from all over town, drawn by the promise of a supportive environment where they could connect with others facing similar challenges. Word spread quickly, and soon, local businesses began donating supplies and sponsoring events. For Marissa, running the center was both rewarding and exhausting. There were days when she felt like she was juggling too many responsibilities, managing staff, organizing programs, handling finances, all while ensuring Leo felt loved and cared for. But even on the toughest days, the sight of families bonding or children laughing made it all worthwhile. Jonathan remained a constant presence, helping wherever he could. Whether it was fixing a leaky faucet, brainstorming ideas for fundraising, campaigns, or simply spending time with Leo, he always seemed to know exactly what was needed. His involvement wasn't just practical, it was deeply personal. He genuinely cared about the center's mission and the people it served, which made Marissa fall for him even more. One afternoon, as they worked side by side sorting donations in the storage room, Marissa paused and looked at him. "Do you ever feel like this is too good to be true?" she asked, half joking. Jonathan chuckled, brushing dust off his hands. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But then I remember that good things happen when people work together. This isn't luck. It's determination, passion, and a lot of hard work. And honestly, I think we deserve it." His answer made her smile, but it also reminded her of how far she'd come. Determination and passion, those were qualities she doubted she possessed during her darkest moments. Yet here she was, proving herself wrong every single day. Despite the progress, Marissa's in-laws weren't entirely out of the picture. One evening, as she tucked Leo into bed, her phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. Her stomach tightened as she answered cautiously. On the other end, a lawyer, representing her in-laws, informed her they intended to file for custody again, citing concerns about her association with Jonathan. Anger surged through her, followed by a wave of frustration. Hadn't they caused enough damage already? Why couldn't they leave her and Leo alone? She hung up, shaking, and immediately called Jonathan. When he arrived, he found her pacing the living room, tears streaming down her face. "They're not going to stop," she said bitterly. "No matter what we do, they'll keep coming after us." Jonathan pulled her into a tight embrace, holding her until her sobs subsided. "We'll fight them," he said firmly. "And this time, we'll finish it once and for all." True to his word, Jonathan sprang into action. He hired a top-notch attorney to represent Marissa and gathered additional evidence to strengthen their case. Meanwhile, Marissa focused on staying strong for Leo, shielding him from the stress as much as possible. Together, they prepared for the legal battle ahead, determined to protect their family. In the courtroom weeks later, Marissa faced her in-laws with a resolve she hadn't known she possessed. With Jonathan by her side and a mountain of evidence supporting her claims, she presented her case clearly and confidently. Her in-laws' arguments crumbled under scrutiny, and the judge ruled decisively in her favor, granting her full custody of Leo and barring his grandparents from contacting them without permission. As they left the courthouse, Marissa felt a weight lift off her shoulders, a burden she hadn't realized she'd been carrying for so long. For the first time in years, she felt truly free. Standing beside Jonathan, she took a deep breath, letting the fresh air fill her lungs. "It's over," she said softly, almost unable to believe it herself. "No," Jonathan corrected, smiling. "It's just beginning." And for the first time in a very long time, Marissa believed him. The months following the custody battle passed in a blur of activity and growth. With her in-laws legally barred from interfering, Marissa finally felt like she could breathe freely for the first time in years. The constant fear that they might snatch Leo away had been suffocating, but now it was gone, replaced by a sense of peace she hadn't thought possible. She woke up each morning with a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that the life she was building wasn't just for herself or Leo anymore. It was for everyone who walked through the doors of the community center. The center itself continued to thrive, becoming more than just a place. It became a movement. People came not only for the resources, but also for the sense of belonging it offered. Families gathered for potluck dinners, kids joined art workshops where their creativity flourished, and adults found solace in support groups tailored to their unique struggles. What started as Marissa's dream had grown into something far greater, a lifeline for those who needed it most. Jonathan played a big role in all of this, though he never sought recognition. He stayed behind the scenes, quietly ensuring everything ran smoothly while encouraging Marissa to take center stage. "This is your vision," he'd say whenever someone praised him for his contributions. "I'm just here to help bring it to life." Yet despite his humility, his presence was undeniable. Volunteers often joked that he was the secret weapon, keeping the operation running seamlessly, whether it was negotiating deals with suppliers or stepping in to fix plumbing issues when contractors were delayed. For Marissa, having Jonathan around wasn't just practical, it was transformative. His steady support gave her the confidence to step out of her comfort zone and embrace leadership roles she once doubted she could handle. And as their partnership deepened, so did their connection. They spent countless evenings discussing ideas for expanding the center's programs, sharing meals under the stars, and laughing over Leo's endless curiosity about the world. Slowly but surely, what began as gratitude blossomed into something deeper, a love that felt natural, inevitable, and built on mutual respect. One evening, after a particularly busy day at the center, Marissa and Jonathan sat together on the porch of her small home, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Leo was inside, sprawled on the floor surrounded by books and toys, completely absorbed in his own little universe. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of blooming jasmine, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. "You know," Jonathan said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence, "I've been thinking." Marissa turned to look at him, raising an eyebrow playfully. "Oh? About what?" "About us," he replied, his voice soft but serious. "About how much you mean to me and how much I want to be part of your life, not just as a friend or a supporter, but as something more." Her breath caught in her throat. She'd suspected for a while that Jonathan's feelings mirrored hers, but hearing him say it aloud sent a rush of warmth through her chest. Still, she hesitated, unsure how to respond. Love was a fragile thing, especially after everything she'd been through. Could she really open her heart again without fear? As if sensing her hesitation, Jonathan reached for her hand, his touch gentle yet firm. "I know it hasn't been easy for you," he continued, "and I don't expect anything overnight, but I want you to know I'm not going anywhere. Whatever happens, I'll stand by you. You and Leo are my family now." Tears welled up in Marissa's eyes as she squeezed his hand tightly. "You already are," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "You've been my rock through all of this. I don't know what I'd do without you." A smile spread across Jonathan's face, lighting up his eyes. "Then let's keep doing this, together." In the weeks that followed, their relationship blossomed naturally, blending seamlessly into the rhythm of their lives. Jonathan moved into Marissa's home, bringing with him a mix of practicality and charm. He fixed the squeaky door hinges, taught Leo how to ride a bike, and even helped Marissa plant a small garden in the backyard. Their days were filled with laughter, teamwork, and quiet moments of affection that reminded them both how lucky they were to have found each other. But perhaps the most beautiful change was in Leo. Having Jonathan around had given him something precious, a father figure who loved him unconditionally. Where once there had been a void left by Ethan's passing, there was now a bond forged through shared adventures and late-night talks. One evening, as they sat side by side assembling a model airplane, Leo looked up at Jonathan and asked, "Does this mean you're my dad now?" Jonathan froze, startled by the question. He glanced at Marissa, who stood nearby folding laundry, her eyes wide with surprise. After a beat, he knelt down to meet Leo's gaze. "I may not be your real dad," he said gently, "but I promise to always be here for you. If that makes me your dad in some way, then yes, I am." Leo grinned, satisfied with the answer, and went back to gluing pieces together. Marissa watched the scene unfold, tears streaming down her face. It was a moment she'd dreamed of but never dared to hope for, a second chance at happiness for all of them. As the years went by, the community center expanded, adding new facilities and programs that touched countless lives. Marissa became a beloved figure in the town, known not just as the woman who founded the center, but as someone who inspired others to believe in themselves. Her story, a tale of resilience, courage, and redemption, resonated deeply with those who heard it. Jonathan, too, found fulfillment in ways he hadn't anticipated. Though he'd always valued success, he discovered that true joy came from giving back, not just financially but emotionally and personally. Being part of Marissa and Leo's lives gave him a sense of belonging he'd longed for his entire life. Together, they proved that love could grow in the unlikeliest places, even in the aftermath of heartbreak and betrayal. For Marissa, the journey had been anything but easy. She'd faced loss, abandonment, and doubt, yet she emerged stronger than ever, thanks in no small part to the man who stopped and looked closer. On a warm summer evening, with the community center bustling in the background and fireworks painting the sky, Marissa stood arm in arm with Jonathan, watching Leo chase fireflies with a group of friends. Life wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was theirs. And in that moment, surrounded by love and laughter, she knew they had everything they needed. It was a new beginning, one filled with hope, purpose, and the promise of brighter days ahead.